Okay, everybody, welcome to this discussion. The pictures from Apollo are transparent and hollow. I've touched upon a lot of the problems with the Apollo pictures a while back on, I think it was my Christian 2 channel when I talked about, the Apollo missions in general. But I'm doing this video because, like I mentioned in the last video, it helps to really have the pictures in front of you. It's not enough to just describe them. As I go through these, I'm going to be describing each one individually and pointing out the problems. And once your eye is trained to know what to look for, if you hadn't seen the problems before, uh, you'll recognize them now. And in at any future time when you look at Apollo missions, you'll instantly see how fake it is. Once you see this, you can't unsee it, and you'll be able to point it out to other people. So let's begin with this first one here. This thing is loaded with problems. First of all, notice the straight pencil line with a ruler, right? It looks like they drew it with a ruler and then just painted in. That's probably what they did. Although I think what we're really looking at here is simply a staging. And that flat line represents where the floor meets the background wall, right? They just have those hills painted on the back wall. Notice there's no stars in the sky. On the moon, you would be able to see a lot more stars than you see here on Earth. And even though the fainter ones wouldn't show up in a picture like this, certainly the brighter ones would. And yet you don't see any stars, either in this picture or in any of the other pictures that was supposedly taken on the moon, right? The sky is always pitch black with absolutely no stars. Once in a while, you will see what's supposed to be the sun, but that looks fake as all living hell too. Friggin' spotlight. But anyway, so notice the straight line, okay? When do you ever see hills here on Earth just jutting out like that with a straight line base? You see the foreground, easing into the mountains, gradually sloping upward, right? You don't see this sharp cutoff line. Notice also how the background hills are a much lighter color than the foreground. Why is that? Because they couldn't get the paint to match up with the foreground. And the lighting, of course, also affects the coloring of the foreground, right? The fake dirt spread out on the stage. Notice also the hill to the left. Look how straight edged that slope is. Again, it looks like it was done with a ruler, right? They drew a pencil line with a ruler and then just, painted it in, airbrushed it in. Look how fake this whole damn thing is. But like I said, as we go through more and more of these pictures, we're going to see fakery of all kinds. This picture was supposedly taken, I don't know which Apollo mission this was now, but this was taken supposedly by one of the Apollo orbiters. So, the orbiter would have been hundreds of miles above the lunar surface at this point. That little dotted line shows that, the edge of the moon, so you can see how high up the orbiter was supposed to be, right? That's the circular edge of the moon there. So from this great height, you wouldn't even see the shadow at all of the orbiter. If you did, it would just be a tiny little dot. It certainly wouldn't be huge. You're only seeing a portion of it there in the bottom right-hand corner. It wouldn't be huge like that. I mean, that's probably 150 miles right there of shadow, right? How does a tiny orbiter from this height, tiny in comparison with the size of the moon, from this height, how does it make a big shadow like that? That's absolutely impossible. This was done, again, in a frickin', in a theater, right? A Hollywood stage prop was used for this, and the idiots didn't take into consideration, oh, wait, no, we can't have that shadow there. That's going to, expose us. There's so many pictures like this where it's like bagged. Here's another one. Look at the shadow angle differences there. We're looking at two different lightings, two lights casting shadows at different angles there. And of course, once again, look at the base of the hills. You've got a straight line, Drawn, it looks like it was drawn with a ruler. What you're looking at is the back wall with the fake hills painted thereon. And then, of course, the phony dirt that was spread on the staging in the foreground. Fake as fake can get. This one here is classic, and there's some other ones like this that we'll look at later in the video. But do you see the problem with the shadow being cast by the lander, the module? Do you see the problem? It's a big fucking problem. If you measure the length of that shadow, it's roughly the height of the lander, which was probably, I don't know, maybe 30 feet tall or whatever. And so the shadow is roughly around there, around 30 feet long, right? And yet it proceeds out to just about the edge of the horizon. Do you see the problem? Unless this lander touched down near the edge of a cliff, which it didn't, there's no way that the shadow would extend all the way to the horizon like that. Unless, again, there was a big cliff drop there, which we know there wasn't. So how could the horizon only be roughly 30 feet behind this craft unless it was on a big stage? And that's all it was, a big fucking stage. And that's why the shadow extends only about 30 feet away from the lander, because that was where the edge of the staging was, God damn it. There's no way that the horizon on the moon would only be 30 fucking feet away. So anyway, let's look at some more problems here. This one, again, problems galore with this one. Notice, first of all, the shadow angle differences, right? You've got something stuck in the lunar surface to the right of the astronaut's shadow there. I don't know what... it might have been a sample, core sample thing. In any case, look at the shadow angle, how sharp it is compared to the astronaut's shadow. Total incongruity there. Notice also what is called the hot spot in this picture. Above and around the astronaut's head, it's almost white from the brightness of the light. But as you move your eye toward the right, it gets dimmer and dimmer. You see what I'm saying? That's called a hot spot. That only happens when you're using a bright fucking spotlight. Obviously, they have two spotlights here, and they're both focused on the same area, but they're creating two different shadow angles, right? But in any case, the sun wouldn't do this. It wouldn't create a hot spot. The sun would equally illuminate the entire surface with the same amount of light, except for where there's shadows, but you know what I mean. You wouldn't have a bright spot like that with the sun. The entire surface where the sun is hitting, where there's no shadows, would be equally bright. You wouldn't have a localized bright spot like that or hot spot, except if they were using spotlights. And NASA even admits they didn't bring any spotlights with them to the moon. So how do you get a hot spot like that? You get it when it's done on a fucking stage. That's how. Here's another good example. You have differing shadow angles once again, and the hot spot. Look at that. Above and around the astronaut's head, the shadow of the astronaut. Look at that bright spot. As you move away from that bright spot, it gets increasingly dimmer. The sun would not illuminate the lunar surface that way. This was not shot on the moon, obviously. Again, look at the differing shadow angles with this one. It's almost a 90-degree difference. Ah, shit. And once again, perfectly flat, straight line horizon, because that's the edge of the stage. They probably used like felt, black felt for the fake sky, right? And notice once again, the hot spot above and around the head of the astronaut's shadow there. That's from spotlights. Um, Here again, you have the hot spot, right by the astronaut's head there, right? The shadow's head. Big bright spot or hot spot. As you move away, it gets dimmer and dimmer. And notice there's a slight different shadow angle too from the pole of the flag there. Look how it's bending a little to the left. It's not aiming straight uh, toward the back of the horizon there, like the astronaut shadow is. Two different angles because two different spotlights were being used, shining on the same area, creating the hot spot. Once again, we got a hot spot, right? Look to the left of the astronaut there. Look at the ground or above the shadow of the head of the other astronaut taking the picture. Look at how bright that is as compared to the foreground. Much, much dimmer. Anyway, I'm trying to think if there's something else to point out here. It probably is, but it's escaping me right now. Anyway, here's another good example of shadow angle differences. Look at that. The astronaut taking the picture, his shadow is almost pointing straight back toward the horizon, whereas the astronaut by the flag, his shadow is bending off at a sharp angle to the right. Look at that bullshit. Once again, look at the hot spot, right? Above the shadow of the astronaut's head who's taking the picture there, to the right of the flag is where it's brightest. And as you move away, you see it gets dimmer and dimmer. That is, once again, from a spotlight, not from the sun. Here again, another hot spot above the head of the astronaut's shadow there. Look at the frickin' hot spot. We also have shadow angle differences again here, don't we? Completely incongruent shadow angles. Once again, we have the hot spot right above the shadow astronaut's head, and look at the inconsistency in the shadow angles again. The flag has a shadow bending off to the left, whereas the astronaut's shadow is pointing almost directly at the horizon, right? Big frickin' problems. You see this, guys, in almost all of the Apollo photos. Almost all of them. Here again, look at the difference in the shadow angles. And look at the hot spot. You can see that two lights are pointing at the same part of the ground, right? But because they're at different positions, they're giving different shadow angles. You would not get that with the sun. The shadows would be going in the same direction, and you wouldn't have a hot spot. Once again, the terrain would be equally illuminated. Son of a bitch. Guys, you don't have to be a fucking PhD to see how full of shit this stuff is. Just a little bit of common sense. Here's another one. Once again, differing shadow angle. Not only shadow angle, but shadow length and width. Look how relatively short the astronaut's shadow is to the right there compared to the one taking the picture. It's much longer and wider. Why? Because he's closer to the source of light than the other astronaut is, who is also at a different angle too, right? Because two different lights are creating these shadows, and you can tell that it's two different lights because they're creating a hot spot focusing on the same area in the upper left part of the picture there. Bright spot that gets increasingly darker as you look, away from that area. Classic frickin' bullshittery. Here's another one. Look at the shadow angle difference here. Again, it's almost 90 degrees, right? You look at the equipment there in the background. Actually, I think that's the rover, I guess. Is that supposed to be the rover? I can't tell. Anyway, it's casting a shadow at almost a complete right angle from the shadow of the astronaut that's taking the picture. And notice you do have, not as prominent in this picture, but there is a bright spot. It's focused around that little piece of equipment in the middle of the picture there, that tripod looking thing. So, the spotlights, plural, because there's at least two of them, right? Actually, technically, it looks like there's three spotlights here because you have three angles. The shadow of the astronaut, the shadow of the little tripod thing is going at another angle, and then, of course, the rover or whatever in the background is a completely all three of these shadow angles are different. It's just crazy, man. Another one, you can see the difference in not only the angle of the shadows of these two astronauts, but the size. Look how relatively small the shadow is of the astronaut in the upper left there compared to the one taking the picture. His shadow is much wider and much longer. It looks like the shadow being cast by the astronaut in the upper left, it looks like the lighting is almost overhead, right? Because it's creating such a short shadow. And you can see that light, along with the one behind the astronaut taking the picture, are focusing on the same spot. You can see the bright spot above the shadow's head, right? The one taking the picture. Both lights are being focused in that one spot. It's dark all around, but bright there in the middle. So both of those lights, once again, are shining on the same area of the stage, but completely different angles. And one of those lights is much closer to the astronaut taking the picture than the light it's probably suspended high up on a ceiling. And because it's further away, it's creating that shorter, smaller shadow for the astronaut to the upper left corner there. Oh, this is classic. Look at this horseshit. Hey, I don't know about you guys, but those mountains there look really impressively authentic to me, don't they? Looks like you could just jump into that picture and go climb up those mountains there. Look how fake it is once again. The mountains don't gradually slope up. They just abruptly begin from a straight fucking line. Look at that. Not only that, but look how, again, the color is totally different, especially the mountain to the right there, much lighter color. Notice, though, that mountain or hill or whatever, it's very flat, isn't it? It slopes up at a straight line. And look how smooth those background hills are. That's always the case in these pictures. The hills are smooth, whereas the foreground is very rocky, very lumpy and bumpy, right? How is it that the hills are so smooth? Because they're painted that way. If you really squint, you can probably see some bristles still stuck to the back wall there from painting that fake shit. Anyway, but guys, just look at that. I mean, can you not see how obviously fucking fake that is? Here's another one with differing shadow angles, and of course, the bright spot right over the astronaut's, the head of the astronaut's shadow there. Bright spot, big bright spot, gets increasingly dimmer as you look away. And once again, you can see the straight line there. What's supposed to be the horizon. Once again, overall, this is a rather dim photo, but you can still see the bright spot right above the shadow of the astronaut's head there. And you got the other astronaut there, once again, casting a much smaller. It's more narrow. It's shorter. And, of course, it's a different angle, isn't it? Cut the shit. Again, completely different shadow angles. And the hot spot above the shadow of the astronaut's head. Very prominent bright spot there. Yeah, oh yeah, the sun's going to do that, isn't it? And look at our classic straight line going off at an angle there in the upper part of the photo, demarcating the lighter colored foreground with the darker color hills this time. The hills are usually a lighter color than this one. It's dark. But notice the straight frickin' line. It's laughable. This is a fucking joke, man. Again, a rather dim photo, but you can see a bright spot above the shadow of the astronaut's head. And look at the shadow angles and the shadow sizes. Completely different. That ain't the sun doing that, baby. Once again, look at the difference in size, in length of the shadows, and of course, in the angle of the shadows. And look at the classic bright spot once again above the head of the astronaut taking the picture, his shadow. Look how bright that is, and it gets increasingly darker as you move away. This is the result, once again, of spotlights. Again, I don't even have to elaborate, right? You can figure out what's going on here. Different shadow angles, bright spot, blah, blah, blah. Typical, same shit. Here we have another good example of the straight line for the where the hills meet the horizon, right? Look at the straight fucking line there. This is absolute horseshit. How much you want to bet that lander is probably no bigger than half a foot or something? It's a fucking model, right? Cut the crap, man. But look at the fake ass hills. You can't see that is a two-dimensional fucking painting. Look how smooth they are, too. They're not rocky at all, once again, like the foreground, right? They're not choppy. Once again, look at the shadow angles and the hot spot. Once again, not only shadow angle difference, look at the size of the shadows. They're shorter. The one to the upper right is much shorter and much narrower than the one in the foreground there. And look at the hot spot. Once again, major hot spot. And look how the background, that happens quite a bit in a lot of these pictures, where the background has kind of like a blurry, fuzzy, it's not very sharp. I don't know why that is, but you see that in quite a few of these pictures. We'll see some more examples of that later. Here again, shadow angle incongruity. The sizes look about the same in this case, so both spotlights are probably about the same distance away from each astronaut, but they're at different angles and thus creating different shadow angles. And the hot spot. Again, hot spot and different shadow angles. Once again, same shit, right? Totally different shadow angles and the hot spot. Totally different shadow angles and shadow sizes and the hot spot once again. Same thing here, right? I don't even have to elaborate. You can see it for yourself now, can't you? You can go through NASA pictures from here on out if you haven't been aware of these problems. You can go through them yourself and you'll be able to see these same fucking problems in just about every goddamn picture that supposedly was taken on the lunar surface. My fat ass they were. Again, the hot spot. Notice the difference in angles and size of the astronauts' shadows. And of course, that nice fake-looking background as always. Here we have the straight line, not only of what's supposed to be the horizon and the hills rising, or the hill rising up from a straight line, but notice the hill itself is a straight line, right? And look at how the color is so much lighter and the texture is so smooth as compared to the rocky foreground. Once again, flat line. The hill just rises out of nowhere from a flat surface, both of those hills. And we have a straight line for the big hill there. Look at that slope. Perfectly straight fucking line. And different color, right? Much brighter in the background than in the foreground, and much smoother. And look at the shadow angle differences once again. The rover is casting a shadow to the right, whereas the astronaut's shadow is casting straight ahead, right, toward the horizon. Pretty much a 90-degree angle difference. And you have a hot spot once again above the head of the astronaut's shadow, as we've seen in so many other pictures like this. Once again, hot spot, shadow angle difference. Look at that. My. And don't forget the fake flat background where the hills rise up. Different color, different texture. Once again, straight line and shadow angle difference and a hot spot. Hot spot again. And look at the shadow angle difference. That's about maybe 45 degrees difference, right? You see the back tire there. It's going off at a sharp angle, completely different from the angle of the astronaut's shadow, which has the hot spot above his head again. And look at the straight line for the hills to rise up out of in the background. And no stars, let's not forget. Once again, look at that flat fucking line. Holy shit. Smooth hills, lighter color hills. Once again, flat line, both for the horizon and that fucking hill to the left. And look at how much brighter color it is. On and on and on. And again, it looks like we got a completely almost 90-degree shadow angle difference here. The rock there is casting a shadow off to the right, whereas the astronaut is casting a shadow almost at a 90-degree difference with the hot spot above the head. Hot spot again and shadow angle differences. There you got that straight frickin' line again to meet up with the hills. Hills being, especially to the left, a much lighter color than the foreground, and smooth as all living hell. It almost looks like it snowed recently, right? You know how the snow will coat hills with a smooth coat, and yet the foreground is all bumpy and rocky. Here again, you've got well, you get the hot spot anyways. I'm trying to see the shadow angles. It's not too prominent there. That astronaut is casting almost no shadow though. Yeah, I think that's the big problem with this one. Why I saved this picture. Yeah, he does have one, but it's showing that the lighting is directly above him, right? He's not casting a shadow off to the left like the pole is, right? Why is that? If this was on the moon and the sun was, shining from one direction, all the shadows would be cast in the same direction, same angle, but not with him. Yeah, that's definitely why I saved this picture. His shadow is being cast beneath him, right? Not at an angle, not away from him to the left, like the pole and the rover. So a completely different light is fixed on him for this shot. Once again, look at that flat frickin', oh my God, man, it's fucking astonishing. Bright spot above the shadow of the astronaut's head there. Oh, yeah, this is one of the fake pictures, supposedly, of the sun. Don't you think the bright sun would have exposed this? And why is it round like that? This halo like that? The sun gives off rays. You know what I'm saying? You would see radiating light shooting outward, not creating a fucking halo like that. But in any case, it doesn't look bright enough to be from the sun, does it? It looks like a fucking spotlight that is, relatively dim compared to the sun, right? Anyway, not buying that. Not buying any of this shit. Here's another, you can see the straight line, and notice how the background, there's a sharp cutoff from the rocky foreground to the blurry, fuzzy, smooth background. You see how it's just a straight line cutoff because that's the edge of the staging, and you're looking at a painting there as opposed to the rocky foreground that they set up. Look at the cutoff. It goes right from being rocky to suddenly, instantly being smooth and kind of fuzzy. Same here, right? Look at the smooth background. There's almost a friggin' straight line there. They pushed up some of the soil up against the wall. You see that in the background? You can see how they push some of it up against the damn thing. But it goes right from being bumpy and rocky to smooth for the background. Cut the shit, man. Here's another. I think one of the main reasons for this picture, again, you got the straight line. See how the background is very smooth. It's not rocky like the foreground. There's a straight line of demarcation. But notice how you're looking at the astronaut in shadow, right? Why is it he's not black there? Almost always when you see Apollo pictures supposedly on the moon, anything in the shadow is pitch black, and yet he's pretty well lit up on the shadow side. You can see him, almost like he's fully illuminated. And yet in other pictures, the shadows, like I said, are pitch black. You can't see any detail. Why are you seeing detail here in what is supposed to be, the left side of his body, all in shadow? Here's another good example of, again, the straight line and the fake smooth hills in the background. It's so freaking fake. Blatantly fake looking. Here again, straight line, right? And look how they painted those hills from white to dark to white to dark. It's alternating like stripes almost. What the fuck kind of shit is that? Oh yeah, that looks natural. That looks normal, doesn't it? Notice how smooth they are. And that big hill in the foreground, look at that shit. A straight line, right? The fuck. It almost looks like when they painted it, they didn't, do you see where the foreground hill meets up with the middle hill behind it? Do you see how it's light colored? It looks like the paint bled through. Do you see what I'm saying? It looks like you're seeing the other hill through the hill in the foreground. That's like transparent. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. I just noticed that now. I've never noticed that before. There's another big fucking boo-boo for you right there. It looks like you're seeing through that hill at the hill behind it. Yeah, I think that's what happened. They didn't put the paint on thick enough or whatever. And so the paint from what's supposed to be the background hill bled through. Holy shit, look at that fucking... Anyway. Again, straight line background, light colored hills. The hill itself is a straight line, right? Look at the bright spot over the head of the astronaut's shadow there, blah, blah, blah. Not only a straight line for the background, but look how fucking bizarre that is. What's that supposed to be? How the hills just disappear behind that horizon. What the fuck, guys? When do you ever see that looking at a hill off in the distance, right? This is so completely full of shit. The only time you'll see that was when you're out on a ship on a completely flat ocean, and you'll see hills disappear like that on the horizon, right, as you go further out to sea. But on the land, you don't see this shit. Look at this fucking crap. Anyway, here's, that classic straight line, the differentiation in color for the background and in texture. Look how smooth the background is. You don't see any indication of, ruggedness, and the hill just rises up from a flat surface. It's fucking ridiculous. I think I saved this one just to show the unusual lines in the hills there. How is that supposed to have occurred? You got these. Do you see the lines in the hillside? What the fuck is that supposed to be? How was that supposed to have come about? But notice again the straight line. This time the line, though, it's kind of hazy, isn't it? It's not a completely sharp, distinct line. It's fuzzy. How do you get that? How do you get a fuzzy transition from the foreground to the background? Did they use an airbrush in this particular instance so that the foreground is part of the background? I think that's what they did. Yeah, if you ask me, that's what they did. the edge of the stage is probably just behind where these rocks are, which are fucking chunks of styrofoam, if you ask me. And so they painted that fake behind the rocks, right? What's supposed to be the foreground ahead of the hills. I think they painted that. That's part of the painting on the wall, and that's why you don't have a very smooth transition line. They airbrushed it, and so it's kind of hazy looking. Son of a bitch. In any case, though, those lines on the hills there, what the fuck is that supposed to be? Almost like a layering, you know. Again, here we have an incredibly fake background. Look at the hills drawn with a ruler, right? And look at how the transition line, once again, guys, is very fuzzy. It's not a sharp line like it is in a lot of the other pictures. So what you have here, obviously, is a painting. Even the foreground is part of the painting. Do you see why that has to be? There's not a sharp, distinct line. You wouldn't get a sharp, distinct line anyway. But if they want us to think that the land was raised up above the base of the hill, it would be a fairly straight line, or at least a sharp line. Even if it was jagged, it would be sharp. It wouldn't be fuzzy like that. So yeah, we're looking at airbrushing there. This is as fake as it gets. And it looks like there's some bleeding through the paint too, where the background hills, some of the lighter color is showing through. If you look carefully, it looks like you have that going on once again. But the wall begins right behind that fake styrofoam fucking boulder. That's probably not even a real astronaut. It's probably a fucking 3 foot tall figurine or something. Who knows? But in any case, that whole background is as fake as it gets. Here you have again the fake hills off to the right there. Look at how straight the line is, and then the background meeting up with a straight line with the staging. Anyway, I'm trying to see if there was something else I wanted to point out here. Probably is, but it's escaping me. Anyway, once again, no stars. What else? I'm trying to think what I was trying to point out here. Just the fact that this the astronaut is supposed to be in the shadow of the lander here, right? But look how well lit he is. How can that be? If you look at pictures of other things in the shadow, they're always pitch fucking black. Here he is supposedly being obscured behind the shadow of the... He should be, a black silhouette. How is he lit up? Some would say, oh, it's backscattering. Well, if it's backscattering, why don't you see backscattering in the other pictures where things in the shadow are completely black, right? Why are they not always black, or why aren't they not always lit up like this guy is from backscattering, if backscattering is their explanation? They only say backscattering when it's convenient, but in other pictures where they're not backscatter lit, they'll make up some other bullshit for that. Get the fuck out of here. The truth is, he should be almost pitch black right here. All you should really see is a silhouette of this guy, and yet he looks, fully lit up in the shadow of the lander. Anyway, once again, like I showed earlier, you see the shadow? How it comes right to the edge of the horizon? The shadow of the lander. Do you see that, guys? That means that the edge of the stage, or the horizon, couldn't be more than 30 feet away, right? Look at that. In fact, if you measure the length of the shadow here, it's not even as tall, which means that the lighting is coming from at a almost overhead angle, right? So that shadow is probably only 10 feet extended beyond the lander. So that means the edge of the horizon is only 10 feet behind the lander. Are you fucking kidding? That can only happen if they landed near a cliff edge, but they didn't, did they? There's no way that the horizon could only be 10 fucking feet away. That's the edge of the stage. Anyways. So you have the bright spot above the the head of the shadow of the astronaut taking the picture, right? Another bright spot, and it gets darker as you move to the right part of the picture. And you do have a differentiation in the shadow angles once again. The astronaut standing by the lander and the lander shadow as well are both bending off to the left at a roughly 45-degree angle to the shadow angle of the astronaut taking the picture in the lower left part of the picture there. Completely different shadow angles. Again, bright spot and shadow angle difference. The equipment there in the background, actually that's the it's one of the, that's the shadow of the lander, right? Notice not only the angles of the shadows are different, but the shadow of the lander is almost touching the horizon again. How the fuck can that be? And the bright spot. Again, bright spot, shadow angle inconsistencies. Again, this astronaut is completely in the shadow, and yet he's fully lit up. Don't give me the backward scattering bullshit, because you would have backscattering in all these pictures. You wouldn't see totally black shadows in any of them like you do in quite a few of the pictures. Oh, and also I want to point out, look underneath the feet of the astronaut, and then to the left of that. That's, what is that, fucking tinfoil? Look at that shit, guys. Look at that shit. How the fuck could that possibly represent a sturdy, constructed piece of equipment there that was designed to withstand the pressure of the cabin inside, designed to withstand any debris that might strike it in the process of landing when it kicked up dirt? And by the way, in all of the pictures of the landers, you don't see the dirt disturbed underneath the lander at all, do you? You would expect an actual crater to have been formed from the landers, pushing the dirt away from its engines, breaking its speed for it to land, right? The thrusters would have kicked away a great amount of dirt and literally created a small crater. You don't see that. And in the process of kicking up that dirt, it would have accumulated on the landing pods. You don't see that either. The landing pods are nice and shiny, brassy looking, right? There's no dirt or small pebbles or anything accumulated into the landing pods, the feet. Again, look at that tinfoil looking bullshit. And the astronaut is supposed to be in the shadow. Why isn't he fully black? Why aren't you seeing a silhouette? Here again, completely in the shadow, and yet he's fully illuminated. And look underneath the pod. Do you see any indication of dust having been disturbed from the thrusters? None whatsoever. Here again, bright spot, shadow angle differences, up the yin-yang. And look how short the flag shadow is compared to the astronauts. Why isn't the flag shadow elongated, stretched out like the astronauts is? Because a different light is shining on that. Once again, look at the shadow going off into the darkness. That means the shadow doesn't just extend to close to the horizon. The shadow, we're supposed to believe, extends beyond the horizon. Oh my fucking God. Guys, look at, you see what I'm saying? Look at the shadow. It disappears. It doesn't terminate. It meets up with the blackness of the background sky. So we're supposed to believe that this shadow extends beyond the horizon. How the fuck is that possible? Look how fake that is. This is probably one of the most obvious, incredibly faked Apollo pictures right here. The shadow should not meet up with the blackness of the sky, indicating that it's being cut off. Oh, and, notice how the pods on the lander, the feet, didn't have any dirt on them in that last picture. Anyway, here again, difference in shadow angles, right? The astronaut over to the extreme left, bottom left corner there, that's his shadow taking the picture. Much different angle than the astronaut, by the lander. And once again, yeah, the hot spot, right, over to the left, above the head of the astronaut's shadow to the left. And here we got some ghostly glow, supposedly from the brightness of the light reflecting off the astronaut's suit. It's creating that little ghostly glow or whatever. But again, look at the hot spot, right, on the ground, all around him, much brighter than the surrounding territory. Again, differing shadow angles and a hot spot. Another hot spot and different shadow length. They also look to be a slightly different angle, but that's not as significant as the length factor. The astronaut's shadow is much shorter than the shadow being cast by the shadow of the astronaut taking the picture. Another bright spot by the astronaut's shadow over to the left. See that? And look at the feet, guys. Do you see any indication of those feet should be buried? You shouldn't even see them, right? The thrusters would have kicked up so much dust that the feet would have been buried, and you would see a bowl-shaped, crater underneath the damn thing from all the dirt and dust it kicked away, all the, the pebbles and whatnot. Nothing. It's pristine underneath the lander. And look at that fake tinfoil shit again. Once again, different shadow angles, and of course, shadow lengths too. But also, of course, the hot spot. Again, no crater underneath the lander. Look how pristine the pod, the feet are on the pod there, the landing pod. No dust. This one, oh, wait a minute. No, actually, I'm going to cite a better example of this later. Yeah. I'm trying to see what it was I was pointing out in this picture. I'm not sure what the big deal was with this one. Yeah, I'm not sure. Anyway. Oh, I guess maybe the fact that the lighting is coming, from the left side of the astronaut, right? How come the right side isn't completely blackened like you see in so many other pictures? I guess that's what I was trying to point out there. Again, I'm not sure why I included this. Oh, but in any case, here's a good example of what I was talking about. See how he's got the camera mounted on his chest? There you go, guys. They didn't have the luxury of putting the camera up to their eye to look through the viewfinder, right? Because they got masks on. So this is the best that 1969 technology could do. They had the cameras mounted on their chest. They're blindly aiming them. How is it that all the pictures are perfectly centered, perfectly focused? The focal length is adjusted perfectly. You know what I'm saying? It's just such complete freaking horse shit. But anyway, Oh, yes. Okay. I see something I definitely need to point out here. The sun, nod, nod, wink, wink, the fucking spotlights, are coming from the right side of the astronaut, right? So you don't see this astronaut's shadow, but obviously his shadow would be cast off to his left. If the camera had zoomed out, you would see that his shadow would be cast off to his left because the light is coming from his right. You can see that, right? Okay. That being the case, why is it that the reflection in his visor shows the astronaut there taking the picture with his shadow going behind him, which is a 90-degree angle difference from the shadow that's being cast on this astronaut coming from his right side? You see what I'm saying? That is a 90-degree difference. The astronaut taking the picture whose reflection is seen in the visor there, should also have the shadow off to a right angle. But it's not. It's being cast behind him, indicating that the light is in front of him. So we have two different lights here, don't we? One light is casting a shadow behind the astronaut in the visor. The other light is casting a shadow to the left of this astronaut. That is a 90-degree shadow angle difference. Bagged, NASA. Bagged. I hope I explained it adequate enough so you can see what I'm talking about. This picture is impossible to have been taken on the lunar surface. And notice, in the visor, you have a hot spot once again, don't you? See it? Right to the astronaut's left on the ground there. You can see how bright that is and how dark the ground gets as you move away from it. Fucking classic, man. Anyway, bright spot. And look at the fake background, guys. And look how blurry it is, right? The background. And even the edge of the rugged foreground kind of is blurry as it connects with the background. You see that? It looks fucking airbrushed. Absolutely airbrushed. Once again, look at the transition from the rocky foreground to the blurry, fuzzy, smooth background. Look how fucking fake that is. They pushed some rocks up to the edge of the wall there, right? And then it just stops. How do you not get any more rocks sticking up beyond that one point? It's a straight line. Look at how fucking fake this is, goddammit. Again, no crater beneath the, see the big heavy engine there at the base of the lander in the middle there? You see that big, that circular, that's the engine, right? That's a thruster. That would have kicked out a tremendous amount of dirt that would have created a hollow beneath there. There is no hollow. It's completely flat. And look how clean the feet are, right? They're nice and shiny, metallic. You don't see any dust, nothing that would have fallen, from the engines kicking the dust up. There's a good close-up of that engine. Look at that, guys. It's pristine. It's not disturbed at all. You see no indication of any disturbance from the engine. Also, do you see the fine lines in the soil all going parallel to each other? Do you see what I'm saying? From upper left to lower right, they all are going in that direction at an angle there, but they're all parallel with each other. Do you see that? They use some kind of a rake or something from up ahead, from overhead, that came down, to smooth it out, to give it the illusion of, but it's a very bad illusion of a natural surface. They would do that to get rid of, stagehand footprints, right? They didn't want you to see shoe prints in the soil from when they set this shit up. So they would have this thing come down and scrape the soil, stir it up so it would look, so it would erase the footprints, right? But in doing that, they left behind these lines. Clearly, this is not natural looking. What on the lunar surface could create parallel fucking lines like that? Cut the shit. Again, look how pristine that footpad is. No soil, no rocks kicked up on it whatsoever. No dust. Once again, no dust. Pristine looking pod. Okay. Then we've got that fake sun again. Look at that shit. Cut the living crap. And why is it that you have the lander looking so lit up like that, right? Look how dark the shadow on the ground is. See how black that is? You don't see any detail on the ground. Why do you see detail of the lander? Why isn't that black in silhouette? Again, shadow angle differences. Look at the rover or whatever in the background there. And then the astronaut's shadow, completely different. Even the tripod, the stick in the middle of the tripod is creating a completely different shadow angle. And a hot spot. Hot spot, once again, shadow angle differences, and the fake background. Oh yeah, total shadow angle difference here. Look at the rocks in the foreground. They're creating shadows that are pointing toward the lower right corner of the image, right? And yet the lander in the background at about a 45-degree angle is casting a shadow to the right. Completely different angles. And look at the fake background once again, guys. Virtually a straight line and totally different texture, you know. Once again, fake as shit background hills, straight line at their base. And look how the shadow of the lander here is almost pitch black, right? And yet other times it's brightly lit up. Fake as shit background, straight line once again. Obviously, those hills are painted on the back fucking wall. Fake hills on the back wall. Look again how much lighter the color is for the background hills. But how do you get hills that just rise up from a straight line, guy? Oh, yeah, that looks convincing, doesn't it? That's supposed to be a hill in the foreground that's in total shadow, but look how straight the fucking line is. Cut the living shit. Again, more fake ass. This time here, they created some texture on this hill, but again, it's not convincing looking at all now, is it? Airbrushed. Look at the straight line of demarcation at the base. And look at those lines once again. What you see what I'm talking about in the hill itself? There's these lines, parallel lines going across. Is that paintbrush lines? Who knows what the fuck that's supposed to be? And again, fake background, straight line. You got a hot spot around the head of the astronaut's shadow. You can see it's brightly illuminating the back of the rover, right? But more toward the right side. As you move toward the left, it's not as brightly lit up. And again, straight line. Straight line. And again, a difference in shadow angles, right? The rover is casting a shadow bending to the right, whereas the astronaut's shadow is... and then you have the hot spot again above the head of the astronaut. Let's see. Straight line, once again. Fake looking hills. Look at that shit, guys. Over to the right, that's supposed to be in the shadow, but how can that be when everything to the left is brightly lit up? How could there be a shadow like that darkening? Does that make any fucking sense? More fake painted frickin' mountains in the background. Straight line at the base, as always. But look how airbrushed that looks, right? That's just not at all natural looking. Different shadow angle and different shadow size, once again, with a hot spot focused around the little tripod thing there. Fake background again. Straight line. And you don't see the lander, which is supposed to be in the shadow, right? You don't see the lander all black. Once again, it's lit up. The astronaut too, right? The right side of the astronaut should be black, all in shadow. You should only see the left side of, you should only see his backside, right? The back of his backpack is all lit up. But you shouldn't see anything on the other side. It should be all black. But no, it's pretty well lit. Again, look at those fake freaking hills, man. Straight line cutting off the foreground from the background. Look at the total difference in color with that one big rock there from everything else around it. It almost has a bluish color. Everything else is a gray. What's up with that? The styrofoam didn't absorb the coloring right, and so it, yeah, what the fuck, man. And again, fake background. Look at the straight line. The hill rises from a straight line at its base. That's the case with all of these hills, isn't it? Every picture we've looked at. Again, fake as all living hell. Look at those frickin', oh my God. Straight line at the base. And again, I'm just focusing in here, not only on that tinfoil looking shit, but then that gray, like tarp looking crap. Look at that fucking bullshit, guys. Can you believe this? They expect us to believe that this thing was able to withstand the harsh environment on the lunar surface, right? Where it's supposed to be, 200 degrees above zero in the sun, Fahrenheit, and roughly 200 degrees below zero in the shade, right? And this kind of material is going to withstand that, not to mention the pressurization in the cabin. Get the fuck out of here. Fake background, straight line. And once again, look at the shadow angle differences. According to the astronaut's shadow, the sun is to his right, right? And it's casting a shadow to his left on the ground. But look at his visor. Look at the shadow angle in his visor. It's not going off, at a right angle, is it? No, it's at a completely different angle once again. And notice in the visor, you have a hot spot once again, right? The light is concentrated in one area and it gets darker as you move your eye away from that area. There's so many problems with all of these pictures. Let's see. Again, fake as all hell background. Looks like they drew it with a ruler. Both the base of the hill and the hill itself going up at that straight, sharp-edged angle there. Trying to see if there's anything else here that I'm missing to point out. Just that the astronaut's shadow, again, isn't pitch black like is usually the case in a lot of these pictures. Again, look at that fake is all hell freaking background. Look at that white streak going across. You see that in the background there? What the fuck is that? Cut the shit, man. Yeah, this looks real. And again, the shadows are not pitch black. You can still see, details in the shadow. I guess I'm just pointing out here that fake tinfoil and the tarp looking shit. You might recall previously, I think it was when I talked about the Apollo missions a couple of years ago, but I cited a quote from one of the astronauts who talked about how they had to walk very carefully because some of the material was so fragile you could poke a pencil through it in the cabin, in the pressurized cabin. What kind of material, first of all, could withstand all that pressure without being punctured just by the pressurization? But you're going to tell me that they're going to have something so fragile that a mere pencil could fucking poke its way through it? Get the fuck out of here, guys. He actually said that, one of the Apollo astronauts. Anyway, this picture, look at the, again, the fake hills. Straight line at the base, straight line at the edge coming up like that. Look at this fucking crap, man. But here's another disturbing aspect of this picture. Notice how the module is casting a shadow off to the right, and the flag is casting a shadow off to the right. But where is the astronaut's fucking shadow? Where is it? Where is it? Why doesn't he have a shadow casting off to the right like the flag and the lander. Big problem there, Houston. Again, he's supposed to be in the shadow here, right? And yet the whole front part of his body is fully illuminated. Not as bright as the back part, which is where the sun is hitting him, but still you can see full detail of his suit when he's supposed to be in the shadow. Once again, he's in the shadow, and yet you can still see all this detail. Look at that straight line. Yeah, that's so realistic. They should have waited for fucking George Lucas. Just what? 8 years later, right? 1977 is when the first Star Wars came out. That looked much more impressive. If they had only waited a few more years, right? Again, straight line. And even though it's straight, look how fuzzy it is. Look how fake and fuzzy that straight line is. It's not, you see what I'm saying? What the fuck is with that, guys? It's a painting, obviously. In this particular instance, anyway. This is one of the very rare Apollo photos that supposedly show the Earth, right? See the problem there, though? The size of the Earth there is roughly the size of the full moon that we see here on Earth. That's bullshit. The Earth is supposed to be, 3.5, 4 times the diameter of the moon, right? The moon is roughly 2,000 miles. The Earth is 8,000 miles. So, yeah, 4 times. The Earth should be 4 times that size from the moon. Why does it look like the same size the moon looks like from, here? Another big fucking blunder on NASA's part. I'm not sure why I selected this one. But once again, look at the fake background, right? Straight line. I think there was something else I wanted to point out with this, and I don't remember. The shadow doesn't look too dark there. Still see some detail. Again, I think just the fake background. Look at the straight line. How unconvincing those hills are. Again, straight line, bullshit background. More bullshit background, straight line. And, of course, the shadow angle incongruity. Look at that shit. I don't know if that's supposed to be the flag shadow to the left there, but look at that. Almost a 90-degree angle difference from the astronaut's shadow. And look at the bright spot around the astronaut. Look how the shadow is not sharply defined here, though, as the shadows are in other pictures. As a matter of fact, the flag shadow or whatever that is off to the left, that's a very distinct, sharp-edged shadow, right? And yet the astronaut's shadow is very fuzzy around the edges. You see that? What do you suppose that could be about? Bright spot above the head of the astronaut's shadow there. And again, different shadow angle, right? Look at the rear tire of the rover. It's going off to the left there at a pretty sharp angle, whereas the astronaut's shadow was pointing straight ahead toward the horizon. And look at that fake horizon once again. Straight line. Straight line again. Fake background. Straight line again. Fake background. There's the so-called Earth again. Look how small it is, guys. It should be 4 times that friggin' size. And no stars, of course. Really convincing hills in the background once again with that sharp demarcation line, straight edge. Straight edge. And look how blurry the hills are. You see that? How unfocused that is. And yet the horizon, the edge of the horizon still looks very clear. You can see some chunks of rock there right near the edge, right? Why does the hill suddenly turn into a blurriness? Both hills, the big one, which looks like it was drawn with a pencil and a ruler, right? The way it angles up like that on a straight, level, flat fucking surface. It's flat, but it's not sharp-edged. It's blurry. But look at the hill to the right, the smaller hill. Look how blurry the edge of that is. The fuck is that? Again, you can really see the lines I was talking about here in that hill. What the hell? How is that supposed to have come about like that? There's no wind on the moon. There's no atmosphere. So it couldn't be wind-driven. What layered it like that? Get the fuck out of here. But look how smooth, other than the lines, but look how smooth the terrain of those hills are. There's no chunks of rock like you have all over the foreground. Straight line at the base. And once again, the astronaut is largely in shadow. How come he's so illuminated? You can see all the details of his suit there. And yet, look at the rover itself, right? The part of where it's in the shadow. It's very black. You don't see any detail there. This is interesting. Look at this shot of the of this tire on the rover. You don't see any tire tracks in front of or behind the wheel. You see what looks like an astronaut's footprint there in the foreground. But do you see my point? How did this vehicle get to the spot where it is now? You should see tire tracks either in front of the tire or behind it, from whence it pulled forward or backed up to be in this position. It looks like they brought a crane in and just dropped it there for this shot, but that it didn't drive there. How did it get there without driving there and leaving fucking tire marks? You see tire marks in all the other NASA photos, right? These damn things left tire marks everywhere they went. How did it get, though, for this shot? How did it get in this position without leaving tire marks in front of or behind the fucking tire? Again, more convincing background. Look at that, huh? Yeah, that looks normal. That looks natural, doesn't it? Cut the shit, man. Once again, straight line for the background. Complete bullshit. Nice smooth hills with a rocky foreground. Again, the astronaut should be largely blackened out here, a silhouette for the most part, and yet you can see a lot of detail in his outfit. But look at the fake straight line once again. Fake straight line once again. And look at the edge of the hill. You can tell they used a ruler again, right? It's a straight line, but it's blurry. It has a ghostly appearance to it. Do you see that? And the other hill, too, off to the right. Very strange. Once again, look how blurry the edge of these hills are, and look how they rise up from a completely straight line. None of these hills, guys, show a graduating, sloping upward of the foreground meeting up with them. It's always this straight fucking edge. It's bullshit. This is not how the real world works, either on this world or on the moon or anywhere else. You're not going to have this shit. Again, look at the blurriness of the edge of the hill there as it meets the background black sky, supposedly. Look at the flat line of the horizon, and look how rocky it is compared to the smooth background hills. Once again, the same shit, right? Once again, straight line. You got some styrofoam frickin' boulders there in the foreground. Once again, straight line. Again, fake ass looking hills. Oh, this is the main thing I wanted to point out with this one. Check out those footprints. What the fuck is that? And look how far apart they are. We're supposed to believe that the astronaut leaped, right? He was standing in the first footprints there in the lower left corner. He was standing there, and then he jumped, and then boom, he landed with his feet together again, and then jumped again. He wasn't walking, he was jumping. do understand that on the lunar surface, you would not want to fuck around. That's the only way he could have done this, right? Is to have jumped. But you're not going to want to do that. I'm sure in the briefings they would have told them, no horsing around. You're going to, assuming they went to the moon, they would have said, don't horse around up there. You're going to be tempted to want to jump because you can jump far because you don't weigh much on the moon, right? You're like 1/6 of your weight. You're going to be tempted to do that, but don't, because you could easily damage your visor. If you crack it, you could instantly die, right? From the depressurization of your suit, or from exposure to the extreme cold or hot, lack of oxygen, blah, 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 right? Depressurization alone would kill you, though. Your blood would boil in an instant. So they couldn't afford the option on the moon's surface to play games like this and jump. That's a pretty good distance, right? That's the size of, 3 or 4 steps jumping and have your feet meet together. You're taking a risk that you could lose your balance, and if you ever fell and, cracked your visor, you're fucking history, right? So that's very problematic there, too. Anyway. Again, fake background. Look at the fucking straight line. Bullshit. And by the way, we're supposed to believe that these rovers folded up and were able to fit in a storage compartment in the base of the landers, right? But guys, just that piece of equipment alone, there's no way that could have fit in that relatively small compartment. But not just the rover. There was all kinds of other equipment that you can see them using on the surface of the moon that was supposedly stored. How the fuck did they fit all of that shit in that one little compartment? It's like, watching Lost in Space as a kid. You remember how they had their chariot and the land. They had a pod that they would use, that could separate from the ship. They could land and then come back to the ship. Remember, and yet, if you look at the ship itself, there's no way they could have fit all of that fucking stuff in there, right? The ship, it had double decker, 2 floors. How did all of that equipment fit in there and have enough room for all of the bedrooms? And get the fuck out. It's just like with the Apollo shit, guys. They sold us a rotten bag of goods. There was not enough room for all that storage. There was not enough battery power to run all of the equipment they brought with them, or the gas or whatever that was used to power the, if it was in fact gas powered, the rover. How did they fit all of this shit? How did they bring enough oxygen? They were up there for some of the missions anyways, for several days, right? How did they have enough fucking oxygen in the backpack? Cut the crap, man. Anyway. Again, straight line for the background, fake fucking hills painted on the... And again, look how straight the edge there to the right of the hill there. Look at the straight edge that comes up. Now the straight line, fake background. Oh, here we go. This is that letter C thing I was talking about in the last video. This is only one. There were 2 pictures like this, but this is the clearest one of the 2. This is a rock that was supposedly on the lunar surface, but look at that perfectly formed letter C, god damn it. That is used in Hollywood, right? To indicate to the cameramen where the camera is supposed to point. C for center. This is the center of the shot. Here you have, again, guys, bagged, right? Totally fucking bagged. Look at this. This is the same background, but these 2 pictures were taken miles apart. The first one was taken, before they left on a rover ride to go exploring. And then this picture on the right was taken later when they drove supposedly a mile or 2 away to take some rock samples or whatever. It's the same fucking background. The same exact fucking background. There's many pictures like this. I just threw one in here as an example. But there's a lot of Apollo pictures where you see something superimposed over the calibration marker, that black cross marking there. All the Apollo pictures have those. It's, again, for calibration purposes. It's actually burnt right onto the the plate of the pictures, right? How do you get this? I don't know what that's supposed to be, some communication device or something. I don't know. But how do you get that superimposed over? You see the point? The calibration marker should be over that, not under it. This is a cut and paste job. They put this fucking thing, instrument, over the calibration marker. There's a lot of pictures, though, from, like I said, there's some pictures of the astronauts are standing in front of calibration markers. Their hand is in front or whatever, Here's another example of that. You can see that instrument there on the rover is also crossing over the calibration marker. You see that? It's covering over it. This is cut and paste job. Again, fake frickin' straight line background. You got the bright spot. I thought that was the last image. This might be the last image. This is a panoramic photo, supposedly, of the entire lunar. I don't know if it's a 360, but it's probably a 180 degree. But notice the differentiation in shadow angle, right? The astronaut's shadow is pointing straight away from him toward the horizon, and look at the bright spot above his head. But then, as you look at the shadow angle of the antennas there and the lander, they're pointing off at roughly a 45-degree angle to the right. Big problem there, Houston. Again, you can see two different photos of two different areas, supposed to be two different areas on the moon. Same background, right? But one has the lander. The other one doesn't have the lander, but it has a lot more rocks than in the image on the left. And you can see the image on the left has a bunch of tire treads from the rover. This image on the right, there's no room for tire treads, right? It's completely covered. They brought out a bunch of rocks and dumped them, but they used the same background. And this time they removed, of course, the fake prop of the lander for this shot. It's supposed to be two different areas on the moon, and yet they have the same background, same hills. Once again, this is the reflection on one of the astronauts' visors, but look at the shadow angle differences, but mostly the size differences, right? And of course, the hot spot above the head of the shadow of the astronaut taking the picture. This one here, the right boot, you see how it has a reflection? There's a bright spot. That's why it's circled there. You see that? That's a reflection of a light. And yet this astronaut, you shouldn't even be able to see him at all. He's supposed to be in the shadow of the lander. And yet here he's coming down the ladder. He's fully illuminated. And you've got some light source bouncing off of his boot and making that shine spot when the sun is supposed to be in front of him on the other side of the lander. So that can't be the sun doing that. What is causing that bright spot, and what is making him illuminated in what's supposed to be a shadow? For that matter, the whole side of the lander should be dark, right? The lander is also illuminated. From what? Again, no crater under the lander. The feet are pristine of the lander. There's no dust on them. Again, you can see the foot of the lander, no dust. And again, notice the shadow angle differences here. I think that's Aldrin, not Aldrin, Armstrong. Or it might be Buzz Aldrin, I forget now. But anyways, this is the famous man on the moon shot, right? I think it is Aldrin, come to think of it. But anyways, look at the shadow angle differences, guys. The astronaut himself has the sun shining over his left shoulder, casting a shadow at an angle to his front right, right? But yet, look at the shadow of the astronaut taking the picture. It indicates that the sun is behind him, casting a shadow pointing toward this astronaut. Completely different shadow angles. Absolutely fucking bonkers, man. The sun is behind the astronaut taking this picture, and yet at the same time, it's behind the left shoulder of Aldrin here. And look at the hot spot in the visor. There's also a hot spot around the feet of Aldrin, right? He's got a hot spot. The light from behind his left side is shining directly on him, and it gets darker as you move away from that spot. But you also have a hot spot around the head of the shadow of the astronaut taking the picture. Fucking unbelievable, guys. Do you see why I say every picture has a multitude of problems, not just one. Every picture you can see, here again, look at the shadow angle differences. And the length of the shadows are completely different too, aren't they? And the width of the shadows are completely different. And there's a hot spot, once again, above the shadow of the astronaut's head taking the picture. And that is the last one. Okay. So anyways, sorry for going significantly over the hour mark, but I didn't want to do this in 2 videos. There you have it, guys. So now you know what to look for. Anytime you look at NASA pictures now, or Apollo pictures, you're instantly going to see them for the fakes that they are. Once you know what to look for, it's complete bullshit. Thanks for joining me, folks. We'll catch you in the next video. Take care.